There we go.
Have you ever had one of those jumps where you've flown off the board and you've jumped miles? Well, it's potentially all to do with what you do on the penultimate step. In this video, we're going to take a close look at the penultimate step and distill the features, the technical elements, and what you need to do crucially in order to get that flying feeling. Over the years, I've come to work out that there are a number of ways in which you can position on the penultimate step. However, fundamental is going flat-footed. This is, in my opinion at least. That will then lower the center of mass slightly and enable you to separate the knees so that you can get the takeoff foot onto the board more quickly. This also enables you to impart more vertical velocity on the board as well and not just go straight across it. The vertical velocity component can be more reliant on the actual intrinsic qualities of the jumper, I will hasten to add. So that's to say whether they are, for example, more eccentrically strong and are able naturally to gain more height from the board, such as Luvo Mayonga and Juan Miguel Echeverria, for example, and to an extent Ivana Spanovic. Now, there are jumpers that don't position so deliberately flat-footed on the penultimate step. I've got some in my training group, for example. One being Daniel, who tends to still set as he goes into the penultimate, but he's quite predominantly 4 foot and he pushes himself into the takeoff. Now this does result in a lack of a takeoff drive hold position, on which I'll speak more about later on in the video. Again, in my opinion, if you don't set your hips on the takeoff and drop the center of mass slightly, you're going to speed through the takeoff and won't be quite so able to impart vertical velocity into the takeoff as I've indicated. Let's take a look at this 12-step jump from Abraham, and on this particular effort he really flew off of the takeoff. He was very deliberate in the way that he made the penultimate step. He stepped down and then moved very fast into the takeoff. Look at the way that he's slightly sitting back on that penultimate step. And if you look at elite jumpers such as Mihambo and Tara Davis-Woodall, you'll see a very similar position. Obviously, that's a still frame and the jumper transitions through that still shot, that frame as it were, very quickly. But that to me, that position is fundamental in achieving a great penultimate. If you position and your hips are slightly rotated forwards, then you're going to get more of a back lift on the takeoff leg as it comes through into the takeoff, and potentially that can create a reaching out onto the takeoff and therefore a braking as you take off. Looking at these still frames of Mihambo, Tara Davis-Woodall and Abraham, for example, we can see variations in the actual torso position. Abraham is quite hunched in the shoulders and he's rotating through his hips. So that's something that's intrinsic to him, but it's something that we do need to try to rectify. Whereas Mihambo and Davis-Woodall are much more linear in the way they position, and that's going to take more speed in the right direction through the takeoff as well. So that's something that you guys need to be mindful of. Trying to sit on the penultimate step, but with your torso at a straight angle and not hunched forwards. What's also crucial is the transition from the penultimate step into the takeoff. Now, I believe that you want to pick the foot up so that it comes down onto the board. Don't just push your foot out in front of you, as that can create a blocking. Rather, from the penultimate, lift the foot so it comes down onto the board, and then you're going to optimize your transference across the takeoff and again get a lot of speed going into the jump. And that's what happened to Abraham. Not only did he position very strongly on the penultimate, but he took his foot down and round onto the board underneath his center of mass, and that optimizes the takeoff, and he really flew from that takeoff. You also need to work strongly, quickly, powerfully from the third step into the penultimate. Now I get the jumpers to push into the penultimate from the third step out. Third step out should be made on the 4 foot, and then you're going flat on the penultimate and flat onto the takeoff. The last 3 steps should create a kind of da-da-da rhythm. And if you hear that, then invariably you're going to get a great takeoff.
There we go.
I hope what I'm trying to explain in this video is showing you that there are lots of nuances to the penultimate step and how it's made, and how you need to look at certain body positions in order to try to get the most optimized positioning on the penultimate. So I've talked about the pelvis position, the position of the shoulders, the separation of the knees, for example, and a slight sitting back on the penultimate, albeit that's for a millisecond. If you hold those key points, as it were, in mind, then it's going to make it a lot easier for you to analyze your own penultimate step, or if you're a coach, analyze what you're looking for in the penultimate steps of the jumpers that you are coaching. Now, I've talked about how to be active through the last 3 steps and how to make the penultimate step. What you don't want to do is jump into the penultimate step. If you jump into the penultimate step, you're going to brake too much and not carry speed through. It's more of a stepping down onto it, albeit very, very fast. So how do you actually improve upon that? How do you develop that quality? Well, there are lots of drills which you can do that will do just that. You can, for example, use mats positioned on the 3rd step out and on the board. They're about 1.5 centimeters high, 1 meter square, and invariably they will set the penultimate step up in the way that you want it without the jumper having to try. Then there are numerous permutations with mat usage, which I shall go through with you guys in another video. And additionally, you can do specific penultimate step work on the track. In real terms, your penultimate step leg needs to be as strong as your takeoff leg. It needs to be particularly good at blocking and being eccentrically, isometrically ready for that impact, so it can be braced, so that then it really shifts your momentum over into the takeoff. 9 times out of 10, if a long jumper overly loads on the penultimate step, then they are slowing down. If their hips drop beyond 2 to 3 centimeters, which is what seems to be the standard across elite jumpers, going by various biomechanics reports produced by World Athletics, then they're going to lower too low down, and that's going to create a braking effect. They're also going to have to lever themselves more off of the board as they've lowered to a much greater extent, and therefore have to rise through into the takeoff. There are some jumpers who do lower more than others, and often they are more strength type of jumpers in that they're able to impart more force into the takeoff in perhaps a slightly longer time frame. Now, we're only talking milliseconds, around the 1200 to 1300 milliseconds of board contact time. But if you lower more on the penultimate, then you've got to lift yourself up, and potentially you've got more time on the board to impart force. One of the athletes I coach, Yasemin, is having more difficulty positioning on the penultimate step compared to, say, Abraham. Yasemin tends to rotate the pelvis forwards, and that creates a greater back lift with her takeoff leg as it comes through into the takeoff. Additionally, the rotation of the pelvis is not going to enable her to step so quickly through onto the board, and invariably she goes long on the last step and blocks. So we've got to get her to get flat-footed. A lot of the time as well, when I look very closely at a video, I will see that she's slightly toey on that penultimate. We need to get down flat on it, and that will set the hips in order for the hips to come through much more quickly and effectively into the takeoff. If you want to find out more about the penultimate step and how elite jumpers do set their jumps up, then do check out this particular video. Please also do consider becoming a member of the channel. Coach athlete level, you'll get exclusive monthly videos which deep dive into various subject matter. For example, biomechanics of triple jump, biomechanics of long jump. As a channel supporter, then you're doing just that. For a small amount of money a month, £1.99, $1.99 a month, you're going to help me produce the content that's hopefully helping you become a better athlete and coach. So if you're interested, head over to the channel's homepage, go to the membership tab and click on there, and you'll be taken through to the various coach, athlete, supporter, channel member offering. If you've any questions on the subject matter of this particular video, then do leave a comment in the section below or through my other social media. And many thanks for watching and staying through to the end of the video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video.